Have you ever wondered about the hardships faced by Native Americans during the Trail of Tears? This journey, often shrouded in the annals of history, was no ordinary trek. It was a forced march, a brutal relocation filled with suffering and loss. In the early 19th century, the United States was a young nation, eager to expand its borders. The hunger for land, the promise of wealth, and the dream of manifest destiny fueled the flames of expansionism. The fertile soil of the Southeast, home to the Cherokee, Choctaw, Muskogee, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations, was eyed covetously by settler farmers. The rich resources and strategic location of these native lands were simply too tempting to ignore. But these lands were not vacant. They were home to vibrant communities, steeped in tradition and culture. Their inhabitants, the Native Americans, lived in harmony with the land, nurturing it as it nurtured them. However, the encroaching settlers, armed with a sense of entitlement and a skewed understanding of progress, saw things differently. In the corridors of power, the debate raged. Should the Native Americans be allowed to retain their lands, or should they be moved to make way for progress? In 1830, President Andrew Jackson, himself a staunch supporter of expansion, signed the Indian Removal Act into law. This act, under the guise of a civilized policy, was nothing short of a death warrant for thousands of Native Americans. The tension between the settlers and the Native American tribes mounted. The Cherokee, Choctaw, Muskogee, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations, despite their noble resistance and legal battles, were ultimately powerless against the might of the U.S. government. Thus, the stage was set for what would become one of the most tragic events in American history. The ensuing years would see the forced relocation of thousands of Native Americans, a journey marked by suffering and death. But this was just the beginning of the Trail of Tears, a dark chapter in our shared history that still reverberates today. In 1838, the forced relocation of Native Americans, now known as the Trail of Tears, began. It was a mass exodus, a journey marked by unyielding hardship and unimaginable suffering. The federal government, under the guise of progress, forced thousands upon thousands of Native Americans to leave their ancestral lands, their homes, their very lives as they knew them. 5 major tribes were affected: the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole. Each of these nations had their own cultures, languages, and traditions, but they shared a common fate. One by one, they were forced to leave their lands and embark on a journey that would span over 1,000 miles. The conditions they faced were beyond harsh. They marched through sweltering heat and freezing cold, across mountains and rivers with little to no provisions. Illness was rampant, claiming many lives. The elderly, the young, the sick, none were spared from the relentless march. Estimates vary, but it is believed that between 4,000 and 8,000 Cherokee alone perished during this forced migration. The Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole also suffered heavy losses. These were not just numbers, but individuals, fathers, mothers, children, elders, each with their own stories and dreams, so cruelly cut short. Yet amidst the sorrow and despair, there was resilience. There were acts of heroism, of kindness, of sheer determination to survive, stories of mothers carrying their children, of elders encouraging the young, of communities pulling together to support each other. These stories of resilience are as much a part of the Trail of Tears as the tragedy itself. This brutal journey filled with suffering and death is a haunting testament to the resilience of these tribes. It serves as a stark reminder of a dark chapter in history, one that should never be forgotten. And it underscores the importance of remembering, of learning, and of honoring the strength and spirit of the Native American nations who endured the Trail of Tears. With thousands of lives lost and their ancestral lands confiscated, the Native American tribes were left to cope with the devastating impact of the Trail of Tears. The immediate aftermath was marked by a sense of profound loss, a loss not only of lives, but of homes, of culture, of a way of life that had been nurtured over countless generations. In the wake of the forced migration, communities were left fragmented, as families and clans were torn apart. The death toll continued to rise even after the journey ended, as the survivors grappled with disease, starvation, and the harsh conditions of their new, unfamiliar lands. It is estimated that nearly 4,000 Cherokee alone perished as a direct result of the removal. But the impact of the Trail of Tears extended far beyond the immediate loss of life. The forced relocation brought about a cultural dislocation that was just as devastating. Traditional practices and rituals once integral to the social fabric of these communities were disrupted, and the transmission of knowledge and customs from one generation to the next was severely curtailed. The loss of their ancestral lands, too, had a profound impact. These lands were not just a source of livelihood, but were deeply intertwined with their spiritual beliefs and cultural identity. Stripped of their lands, the Native American tribes were also stripped of a vital part of their identity. Yet in the face of such monumental adversity, the Native American tribes showed remarkable resilience. They rebuilt their communities, preserved their languages and traditions, and fought to maintain their cultural identity in the face of relentless pressure to assimilate. The Trail of Tears marked a dark chapter in the history of the Native American tribes, a chapter that bore witness to unimaginable hardship and suffering. But it also bore witness to the indomitable spirit of a people who, despite everything, refused to be erased. The Trail of Tears had forever changed the course of Native American history. Despite the immense suffering, the legacy of the Trail of Tears is not just one of loss and despair. The real story, the one that history sometimes forgets, is one of resilience and survival against unimaginable odds. It's about the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Creek, and the Seminole, who even in the face of forced relocation and devastating loss, held on to the essence of who they were, their cultures, their languages, and their traditions. Their fight for survival was not just physical, it was cultural, it was spiritual. They built new homes, established new communities, and continued to pass on their values, their stories, and their heritage from one generation to the next. They kept their cultures alive in the songs they sang, the tales they told, and the traditions they upheld. But the legacy of the Trail of Tears is not just about the survival of these nations. It's about the recognition of this harrowing event and the lessons we can learn from it. Even today, the Trail of Tears is commemorated with memorials, historical markers, and annual remembrance events. These efforts help to ensure that this dark chapter of history is not forgotten, that the stories of those who walked the trail are remembered, and that their sacrifices are honored. These commemorations also serve as a stark reminder of the injustices inflicted upon the Native American nations and the resilience they displayed. They remind us of the importance of understanding, acknowledging, and learning from our past. They remind us that the legacy of the Native American nations is not confined to history books, but is alive and thriving in the hearts and minds of their descendants. Yes, the Trail of Tears was a journey of hardship, of loss, of forced removal from ancestral lands. But the legacy it left behind is so much more. It's a testament to the strength and endurance of the Native American nations, a beacon of resilience in the face of adversity. The legacy of the Trail of Tears is a poignant reminder of the strength and resilience of the Native American people. The history of the Trail of Tears is a vital part of our shared past, a past that we must never forget. It's a tale of resilience and survival, but also a reminder of the injustices perpetrated against the Native American nations. It is essential that we continue to educate ourselves and others about this significant period in history. Through understanding, we can foster empathy and respect for the cultural heritage and rights of Native Americans. We can support initiatives that protect their lands, preserve their languages, and celebrate their traditions. This history is not just a story of yesterday, it's a lesson for today, and a guide for tomorrow. So let's delve deeper, let's explore more stories, read more books, and listen to more voices from the Native American communities. Let's ensure that these narratives are no longer overshadowed but stand in the light of our collective consciousness. By honoring the memory of those who walked the Trail of Tears and supporting the rights of Native Americans, we can contribute to a more inclusive and understanding future.